Alright, from the beginning, welcome to Mondays with Monte. I am Montgomery, and today I'm going to be talking about zones of control. Now, what is a zone of control? Well, let me tell you, a zone of control is the area around a champion in which they pose a threat to their opponents. And a good example of this would be Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank's zone of control is approximately a circle around him whose radius is about the range of his rocket grab. So if you were to just draw a circle using his rocket grab, that's roughly his zone of control. And it's easy to see why. Because if Blitzcrank hooks you, he pulls you to him, he knocks you into the air, you get silenced, all of his buddies come and beat the ever-living snot out of you, and a fun time is had by all of them and not you. A more complicated champion to look at would be Lee Sin. His zone of control isn't a simple circle. Is it hiccuping? Is something going horribly wrong again? Is something going on with my computer? That would be crazy. That should not be happening. I'm going to pull up my own stream. I am sorry for the delay, ladies and gentlemen, but things seem to be going a little weird. I am looking at myself. This is a little weird. I'm looking at myself, looking at myself. We have Monteception here. All good again, huh? All good again. Well, we may be having some problems today, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize. I don't know if my ISP is doing something crazy or what is going on, but I will try to monitor chat and make sure that my good buddy Pete lets me know if anything is going wrong. Where I left off, I was talking about Lee Sin's zone of control. Now, Blitzcrank's zone of control is a simple circle, but Lee Sin's is a little more complicated because instead of just having one little skill shot that he can use to suddenly close the difference to you, there's also his safeguard ability, which he can use to jump to minions, to wards, to anything else that happens to be conveniently nearby. And that extends his zone of control. So rather than a nice, easily understandable circle, his zone of control is more of this amorphous blob that depends on where minions are, where wards are, does he have a ward in his inventory, and all of that sort of thing. So right away we can see that understanding zones of control is actually very dependent on understanding champions. If you have no idea what a champion does, you have no understanding of their zone of control. That's a very obvious thing to say. But, you know, somebody who never has played against Xerath before, how are they going to know that Xerath can just completely bomb them from orbit when they can't even see him on screen? How would they know that? Unless they were the kind of studious person who trolls through LoLWiki looking for tidbits of information, they would not know that. And so, having a good amount of experience or just even book knowledge of what a champion can do is very important to having a sense of zone of control. But even then, zones of control are not easy to understand because they're dynamic. If we go all the way back to that definition I said at the start of the show, zones of control are the areas around a champion in which they pose a threat, and that's the key word, to their opponents. Logically speaking, if you don't pose a threat to your opponents, you don't have a zone of control. And the amount of threat you pose changes your zone of control. A super-fed Akali has a much stronger and even larger zone of control than one who's just been completely shut down. And the same goes for any champion. That Blitzcrank that we talked about earlier, if he has no health worth mentioning, not even his passive, are you afraid of being grabbed by him? No, if he grabs you, you just kill him, and then you thank him for the help. That's what threat does to your zone of control. So as your health changes, as wards go down, as minions move, as you get items, as you get farm, as your jungler does things, as your teammates disappear from the map and reappear, zones of control change. The amount of threat that you pose to your opponents and your opponents pose to you changes constantly. And that's why we have these lovely little dances that everybody does in lane all the time, because zones of control change. Now, this is a lot to just kind of grapple with and let sink in. And I have a quick report that the stream may have died for somebody. I am going to check. I still see myself. That's good, because as long as I can see myself, the most important person in the room is doing fine. I I kid. You are all very important people to me. I hope that everybody is having an okay time. I don't know if Twitch is doing something, but in the worst possible case, I will be putting this show on the archive so that you can all see everything you might have missed. Hopefully you don't have too many technical problems, but I'm just going to steamroll ahead from this point. So, moving right along, as I was saying, this is a lot to let sink in. There's all sorts of difficult concepts getting tossed around here, and we're going to try to just smooth things out, and I'm going to do that by showing you some replays. So let's go to the first one. Now, in this replay, you can see that I'm playing one of my favorite champions, as usual, Akali. You've seen me play her before, but this time is different. This time, I'm not jungling Akali. In fact, I'm going to be top lane versus this Wukong on the opposite team, and that's a very standard lane for him. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with these champions, I'll very quickly go over their abilities, because, as I said earlier, knowing what a champion can do is important for understanding zones of control. So what are Akali's abilities? Well, her passive is just some extra damage on her auto attack, although she also gets some spell vamp. Her Q is a ranged nuke that, if she gets in melee range, she can auto attack or use her E to proc the mark again and do some extra damage. She's got her Shroud, which is a nice circular area. She can hide it and be stealthed. And, of course, she's got her E, which is a point-blank AoE around her. Not very large, but it's some extra damage. And then there's her ultimate, which is a fairly long-distance gap closer, approximately from where she is now to, say, this flame. It's very big distance, it's got 3 charges, it's pretty strong. Wukong, on the other hand, he just gets some extra armor and MR for his passive. His Q is just a melee range attack hit, he just smacks somebody around with that. His decoy is his W, he will leave a copy of himself in place, and then he himself is stealthed for 1.5 seconds, allowing him to move around freely, although it's pretty obvious he's done something silly because he's stopped. And then there's his E, which is actually a very short-range gap closer, about from where he is now, maybe to this sort of brown patch right here. It's about maybe half the distance to the shadow, not the biggest distance, but it's fair distance. And his ultimate is a whirly spin of death called Cyclone, kind of like a Fiddlesticks ultimate, only he's AD, and it has an automatic knock-up. So these are the two champions who are going to be going against each other in this top lane. And obviously I'm playing Akali, so I'm awesome and I will most certainly not horrifically lose this lane in any way, shape, or form. So one of the things I'm going to point out right away is that Wukong took his Q at level 1, which is just a melee range ability, whereas I took my Q at level 1, which is not a melee range ability. This is a ranged ability. And so already, this gives me an advantage, because what's my zone of control? Well, as Akali right now at level 1, my zone of control is the distance in which I can throw that Q, that ranged ability. Whereas Wukong's zone of control is melee range, because all he has is a melee range ability. And if you're paying attention, you can see that I'm using this to my advantage, and I'm just constantly throwing my Q at him. It helps when you have infinite energy. Now that he's level 2, he does have his Nimbus Strike, he can close the gap, but it's approximately the same distance as my Q, and if he does it when I'm near my minions, it can be disadvantageous. So this Wukong is actually waiting until level 3, that's actually a really smart thing to do, at which point he can drop his decoy, which the minions will attack instead, and beat the snot out of me, hopefully. He also has a much larger creep wave than I do at this point, which makes him a larger threat, because if we fight, if I auto-attack him, all of these minions are going to turn on me and start dealing a bunch of damage. But I'm still keeping up with my harass from my Q. I'm level 2 though, and he's level 3, and he's jumped on top of me. I've actually taken a lot of damage, as you can see, and that was a fairly interesting exchange. He's a health bar and a little bit more ahead of me. I've used a potion, but he's jumping on top of me again. He knew that he was winning that last exchange, so he's gone all in, except the Ignite is not enough to kill me, but he has got me down to 1 health bar, and I have to hang back. And if you saw what he did right there, he used his decoy to stealth and try to get closer to me. But because I know how Wukong works, and because I know that once he's gotten this far ahead, he no longer has to use his decoy to disengage, but can actually stealth forward and try to get something done that way. Because I know that, I hung way the hell back. I was not going to let any of that monkey business get to me. And so I'm perfectly safe. He couldn't get me. Although if Xin Zhao wanted to make something happen, maybe he could have snuck around here and tried to murder me along with Wukong, because this big creep wave is pushing to my tower. However, Wukong is just going to go back to base and maybe buy something, and I can farm in peace. And so we've already seen a little bit about how these zones of control work. Early on, I had a little bit of an advantage because I had a bigger zone of control. I could attack him with impunity. But once he hit level 3, and he hit it before me, he was able to just jump and attack me and smack me and then get away using his decoy, and I just took a lot of damage as a result, and he won both of those trades, and even without Ignite, he would have won that second trade and put me in a bad position. But things are actually going to turn around here, and the reason is Wukong went back, and he's got boots now, and that's good for him, but he only had 9 creep score, which isn't a lot. Because he left me to myself, I've been able to farm up a fairly good amount of gold. In fact, with these last couple of creeps that I'm picking up, I will have enough gold for 2 amplifying tomes and a ward. And that is a very substantial advantage. Not only will I be able to see if any jungle ganks or roaming mids are coming, but I have an extra offensive item up on top of this Wukong. He just has a Doran's Blade, which is a very good item. It gives him AD, it gives him health, it gives him some sustain. But I've got 2 amplifying tomes. That's 40 ability power. That'll increase my ranged harass. That'll do a lot for me. Now this Wukong's being a deer, and he's trying to help his team out. This Cho'Gath has gone into his jungle, and he just wanted to make sure that that Cho'Gath did not get away. That's a really nice team-oriented mentality. I'm proud of this Wukong for that. However, in so doing, he basically missed an entire creep wave at his tower. And so despite the fact that he's been in the lane for a while now, and I'm still on my way back, I've only just arrived, he's still a good 12 creeps behind me, a good 2 waves. And now he's attacked me again, and all of a sudden we see that advantage. I mean, look what just happened. He just attacked me in the same exact way he did before. But because I got my Shroud down, which does give me a little bit of armor and MR, because I've got these 2 amplifying tomes, and because I hit him with my Q and with my E to proc the Q, he's ended up down 200 health. Whereas I basically I haven't lost any health at all. And all of a sudden, the lane dynamic has changed. My zone of control is now a lot stronger than his, even though they're approximately equal in size, simply because if he attacks me, I appear to win. And so now, Wukong's in an odd position because his zone of control is the same as mine, so anytime I enter his zone of control, he's in mine, and because I'm stronger, I win out. So my pressure, through being stronger, invalidates his zone of control. And now he has to hang all the way back here, if you've been watching this entire time, up until Annie came to try to make something happen. Wukong was just completely away from his creeps. He was not able to get any of the creeps on my side. He was getting experience, but that was about it. And that's what we call zoning. You've probably heard that term before, but when you can't get anywhere near the creeps that you need to get near so you can kill them and get the gold and such, that's called zoning. Now that was only a partial zoning because he was getting experience, but it's still very damaging to be kept away from getting creep score, because what was Wukong able to buy? Well, when he went back, he only had enough gold for a sapphire crystal. And that's actually a very bad buy for him right now. Why? Well, sapphire crystal helps him keep his mana up. He comes into the lane with more mana, and because he has more mana, he can trade more often before he has to go back. But what's his problem right now? It's not that he's running out of mana when he trades me. It's that when he trades me, he loses the trade. And so trading more often is not actually all that helpful to him, because if he trades, he loses out. I mean, I actually just got my ultimate. You can see I jumped on him from a huge distance, and look at how far back he now has to stand. He does not want to get close enough for me to ultimate him. He does not want to be anywhere near me because he knows, you know what, every time we trade, this Akali's winning, and I just have to stay by my turret, because if I go out there, he's just going to repeatedly beat the crap out of me, and I will die or just have to go back, and that's a bad thing. Now, thankfully for this Wukong, I pushed everything to his turret, and he can now get some farm in while I'm back at base. But unfortunately for Wukong, I have finished my revolver, which gives me even more spell vamp, and I have a longsword on top of that. I probably should have actually picked up another ward. I'm being a doofus. I didn't have enough gold for it. I wanted the longsword more than the ward. You should not be a doofus like me. But now Wukong has pushed the lane out himself, and he's roaming around. He's got his own ward that he wants to place safely. And so he's going to, skirt around here, place his ward, and then he's going to make a horrible, horrible mistake. And he didn't actually place his ward. I thought he had. That's my mistake. But here we see, where is Wukong? Wukong is very definitively within my zone of control. Now, the element of surprise can be an effective tool at doing things that your opponent does not expect, and when you do something your opponent does not expect, you do affect their zone of control. But I had a ward here that let me know he came into this bush, and even though this ward is very poorly placed, as you can see, it's not actually in the bush, I knew he was coming and probably going to do something cheeky. And so when he comes and attacks me, things do not go well for him. He jumps on me, he attacks me, I hit him with my Q and my E, and now he's trying to stealth away. But we can see already, at this very moment, he came out the worse for wear from that. He took 200 damage, I took a little less than 200 damage. But not only that, but he's still in my zone of control, and if you see how I moved aggressively. A number of players would actually have retreated at this point, but because my ward was there up until just a second ago, I knew that I'm safe, I moved forward, and now Wukong's in a bad position, because what's going to happen? I'm just going to jump right on top of him, attack him, chase him into the bush. I'm slowing him with a Kali's Shroud. It does actually have a slow in addition to the stealth and all the other fun bells and whistles that come with it. I can chase him into the bush, I can hit him with her Mark of the Assassin, I can then attack him, hit him with everything I've got, and let's just look at what went horribly wrong for him. At the end of this trade, I'm only down 100 health. He's down 745 health. This is really a disaster for him, and this really emphasizes how little zone control he has, because if he just doesn't pose a threat to me. He poses no threats whatsoever, and so, for the rest of this lane, I can just push him back. He's all the way back at this turret. He's recalling. Why? Well, the wave is pushing to me. It's not coming in his direction anytime soon. If he were to hang around, what would happen? Well, he'd probably just die. So he wisely goes back to buy some more items. He's getting a couple wards, but because he actually didn't get any creep score when he was in the lane as he came around this way, he couldn't buy anything worthwhile. All he could get were a couple awards, some potions, and maybe this will help him. Maybe things will work out well, but for the most part, he's just in a terrible, terrible position. Now, thankfully for me, I put my shroud down so this Xin Zhao is not able to actually murder me. I was even cheeky enough to hang around for a long time, but I'm perfectly safe. There are shadow minions. This is sort of a glitch that came up in the last couple of days with replays that were during the Nami patch. Not much I can do about that, except I can always do crazy rewind shenanigans. Wukong enters my zone of control again. He just takes a bunch of damage for no gain, really. I got some damage, but again, it's only it's about 175 maybe. He took more like 300 again. Just terrible damage on him. He's using a potion, and that potion's going to bring him even with me. I'm checking the bush for Xin Zhao. I thought maybe he'd hang around. He doesn't. And what's Wukong able to do? Well, he knows he can't come this way anymore because I'll just murder him. So he has to come around this way again, and he's just completely zoned. He's gotten all of 3 creeps since he came back to lane. That's it. He's basically got a ward's worth, not even a ward's worth of gold. Everything else he's got, all this 300 gold, is just passive gold from just being around. He might as well be, in the fountain. Why? Because he can't enter my zone of control. If he gets too close, I will just jump on him, I will attack him, and I will probably kill him. And the worst part is, if I wanted to right now, I could probably just let this wave push and make things get worse for him, but I'm pretty confident in my abilities just to murder him if things go my way, so I'm actually pushing just a little bit, keeping him off the creeps just enough so that he's getting zoned and able to get farm, but not so much that I'm putting myself in a disadvantageous position, I can eventually push this wave and do a bunch of damage. But you can just see he's always a set distance away from me, and that distance is generally the range of my ultimate. But the moment he's within range and in a disadvantageous position, I attack him, I'm igniting him, and in fact, I'm even looking to tower dive him. He's using his ultimate. I'm going to wait a little bit, but he's got 2 bars of health. He flashes away. I've got flash. I'm not jungling. No smite on this Akali, and I have murdered him. And I'm going to make a little bit of a mistake here. As you can see, if you're watching the minimap, I have 2 champions in hot pursuit. I'm not recalling. In fact, I'm running right into Annie. And she hits me with some stuns. There's a Tibbers, everyone's favorite bear, and I'm dead. Well, that was embarrassing, but I killed Wukong. It's worth it. Totally worth it. And you can see the shadow minions piling up. They're souls of the departed. Sad for them, but as you can see from this lane, things are not going well. This Wukong that I'm playing against, he's got a third of my creep score right now. That's how powerful zones of control can be. If you have a huge advantage and you have a way to press it against your opponent, you can just defeat them outright like that. You don't even have to fight them. You just stand around and be like, hey, I'm here. You can't be because I'll murder you. Nice to meet you. That's how bad things can get. So Wukong is back in the lane, and he's got an amplifying tome, and he's obviously working towards Sheen. He's a big fan of Trinity Force on Wukong, and if he can finish the Sheen, it can help him trade against me a little better. The problem is he hasn't finished Sheen yet, and the only thing that amplifying tome does for him is it increases the damage on his decoy by 12. This is not enough damage for him to win trades where he's falling behind by 200 health. So he's just in really dire straits. I have pushed to his tower, but I am so much of a threat that if I just hang just outside of tower range, I can actually zone him off these minions even when he's under the tower. I mean, look at him. He's deathly afraid of me. He's at half health, and he can't even get these minions that are under his tower because I'm applying so much pressure with my zone of control. It's so strong that even though this turret, which has its own zone of control, is right here, he could not get most of these minions. And the lead just keeps expanding. I'm actually very far ahead of him in gold, about 1,500 gold right now, which is why I've now got a Vamp Scepter and Sorcerer's Shoes and all of that. This is basically a complete disaster for this Wukong. There's not a whole lot that he's able to do about this. And in fact, he never actually succeeds in doing anything. This is the kind of situation that Riot tends to not like happening, and most champions that can generate this situation are usually nerfed horribly. In fact, Akali has been nerfed quite a number of times because between her spell vamp, her huge range, her lack of any mana costs, and all of that nonsense, she can just do this to anybody she gets a good lead on, if she gets the lead. Wukong is now running for the hills, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm just going to kill you. And I do. And I'm just going to not repeat my previous mistake, and I'm going to recall right here. I'm actually outside the range of their turret. They can't see me. And because I saw that these minions were not going to be arriving, since I looked at my own, and I did a check, I know that I was safe to recall there. I escape easily. I'm getting very close to my Gunblade, and this match is practically over for this Wukong. Now, the good news for his team is that their bot lane is not doing absolutely horribly, but in the end, this will not work out very well for them. So, we've seen a little bit of zone control here, and we've seen that it's very powerful and very important to laning. Almost all the positioning that occurred in this top lane was dictated by zones of control. Early on, Wukong stayed a ways back. Why? Because I had my range on Q, and so at level 1, he would have to close to melee distance with me, and I could just hit him with my Q, and he probably would never reach me unless I wanted him to, and so it was disadvantageous for him to try to get close to me, because his zone of control was smaller than mine. Then, much later, when he hit level 3, he was able to do a lot of damage to me, because his QWE combo was stronger than my QE combo, and so he actually chased me out of the lane, and that was bad for me. But then he went back to his base, he bought boots, I went back to my base, I bought 2 amplifying tomes and a ward, and then I had the advantage. And once I hit 6, my zone of control became much bigger, he couldn't get anywhere near his creeps, and things were just bad for him. But it's not only top lane where this kind of thing can happen. We're actually going to look at this very same game at a completely different lane. So, here are all the shadow creeps here, but we're going to roll back time, and we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, and instead of looking at Akali, we're going to look at the mid lane, where we have the incomparable Ahri, played by Skittles85, versus Herrick on Annie. And as Miss Q pointed out in the chat, the reason you're seeing the updated Annie model is because there have been some really weird glitches with older replays right now, and in order to make this one work, I had to repair it and make it work in a newer version of the LoL client, and so we've got the new Annie model with My Little Red Riding Hood or whatever version of her. I forget the name of that skin. But let's stop dithering and talk about this matchup. Ahri has quite a number of ranged abilities. She has her Q, which is just a line nuke, but she also has her Charm, which is a charm ability. If it hits somebody, it actually makes them walk helplessly towards her for about a second at rank 1. And then she's got a couple abilities that aren't exactly ranged, but are fairly close range damage abilities. There's her W, her Foxfire, which gives 3 little flames around her, which will hit nearby enemies. And then there's also her Spirit Rush, which is a gap closer and also a dash. She can move about with it and it'll hit any nearby enemies with blasts. It's fairly strong. But on the other hand, we have Annie. And Annie has her passive, which allows 3 of her abilities to stun. 3 of them. So if she has her Q, if she has her W, if she has her Tibbers, she can stun Ahri and do a whole ton of damage with impunity. On top of that, she has a Molten Shield, which reduces the damage she takes. And that gives her a powerful zone of control, because anytime she has her stun up, if Ahri hangs around within the range of either her Tibbers or her Disintegrate, Ahri will get stunned, and Annie will get to do a whole ton of damage for free without any care in the world. Whereas Ahri has to rely on skill shots. If she can't hit her charm, her zone of control is much weaker. So we can see that Annie is trying to charge up her passive. She's casting her Disintegrate at minions. She's actually got it charged now. And all of a sudden, Ahri is backing way away from this Annie. Why? Well, Annie actually also has Flash. So if Annie really wanted to, not that this would be the wise thing to do at level 1 when you don't have all that much damage, she could Flash stun Ahri, and if Ahri was too far ahead, and Xin Zhao was feeling cheeky and wanted to gank, she could actually be in a lot of trouble. You can see her throwing out her Q, trying to get some damage on Annie, but because Ahri is standing so far back, her Q is kind of out of range. So we have a fairly strong battle of zones of control here. However, Annie is not able to use any of her mana, because if she were to cast a spell, she'd lose her stun, and if she loses her stun, her zone of control gets much weaker. But simply because she has this stun, and it's a lot harder for Ahri to land her charm, Annie has actually been pushing Ahri back quite a distance from her minions, although Ahri has been getting close enough to get most of the experience, and is actually keeping fairly close in creep score to this Annie. Annie is taking a lot of unnecessary damage by constantly running into the creep waves as they come up. Ahri actually lands her Q for the first time on Annie, and you can just see the same sort of posturing, this dynamic that changes as abilities come off cooldown, as mana is spent, and as abilities are available. It's all very important. They're both level 3 now fairly quickly, and Annie has actually decided to go roaming. And this is fairly important because it means that Ahri, who's not entirely sure where Annie is, but can kind of guess, is able to get experience, able to get these creep score, and now Annie is in the bottom lane where this very unfortunate Sona is unsuspectingly just going to get the snot beat out of her. Rammus taunt, Annie stun, ignites, a flash from Annie, and she's gone. And oddly enough, Caitlyn got that kill because of a trap. Kind of amusing, but Caitlyn got the kill, so 3 champion kill right there. But now, because Annie spent so much time away, and because she only got an assist instead of a kill, she's actually a little bit behind this Ahri. Ahri just hit level 4. Annie is, well, she's close, but she's a little bit behind. And she walks right into Ahri, who hits her with a charm, ignites, throws the Q down, plus her W, and Annie is gone. And that's the danger of zones of control. Annie didn't have her stun up, and she walked out in the open, no creeps between her and Ari landed the charm. The moment Ari landed the charm, she went all in, just destroyed that poor Annie, and she has perished, and this is going to allow Ari to get even further ahead. You can see she's level 5, Annie is still only level 4, and so advantage Ari. Annie did successfully roam and cause a kill down here. This Caitlyn is ever so grateful that her trap got the kill, but Annie is now just a little bit behind. Just a little bit. They're actually close in creep score, so it's not the end of the world for this Annie, but she is going to have to be a little bit more careful because this Ari right here has a little bit of an advantage. She has a kill, not an assist. She has a few more creeps, but because this Cho'Gath, who if you recall earlier, drew this Wukong away from these creeps, because he's died in the jungle, Annie has another assist, and she's actually, outside of experience, which is important, she's actually pretty close in gold to this Ari. She's only 120 gold behind. It's not the end of the world for this Annie. That's a ward. It's not going to confer a huge item advantage to Ari, but Ari is going to come back to lane with both a Sapphire Crystal and a Ruby Crystal. And in this case, the Sapphire Crystal is not a mistake, because mana is very much a concern for Ari. The range on Ari's charm and her Q is actually longer than Annie's range, so if she can hit Annie with a charm at range, she can potentially make things happen. But she has to hit that charm, and usually you throw a few charms out here and there, and you might miss a few, and so you need mana for that. And health will actually also help her survive Annie's burst if Annie does end up flash Tiberising her and stunning her and all of that. So Annie's roamed top to try to make something happen up here, but I had my very ill-placed ward that doesn't actually cover this bush, as you can tell. This is the amazing Wonder Ward, but it did let me know that Annie was coming, and so I was safe. However, she did buy Wukong a little bit of breathing room. He was able to get a few creeps and go back, and just let me farm. So Annie has roamed back mid again, but again, she's level 5. Ari's level 6, so if it wasn't for the fact that Xin Zhao was here, Annie's zone of control would be a lot weaker. In fact, it's Xin Zhao's presence that has made Ari so careful, because if Annie were to get a stun on Ari, Xin Zhao would be sure to quickly follow, and she'd be forced to use her ult to escape, rather than to make something happen on this Annie. They've turned and they've seen that there's a Cho'Gath here. They're going to try to make something happen again, but Cho'Gath is actually escaping fairly easily because he saw them turn around. There's a purple ward right here, so he knew they were coming, so nothing comes of that. And Annie is hurting herself a lot by all this roaming, but I am going to applaud this Annie. Why? Because she's trying very hard to help her team. This is a ranked 5s game, as you can tell by these little monikers next to each champion. But this Annie, she roamed top, she roamed bottom, she tried to roam bottom again, but she's just been a very big team player. It's hurt her individually a lot, but anybody who's thinking more about their team than themselves gets a good grade in my book, even if they get charmed by Ari and murdered again, as this Annie just did. So Annie's died again, and that's really bad, because now this Ari has a 2-level lead, and all of the Shadow Minions are welcoming Annie into the realms of the damned. But Xin Zhao comes up, gets a little bit of damage, but not enough. The flash came out from Ari, and so she escapes relatively unscathed. She took a little bit of damage, but she's fine. Xin Zhao didn't really accomplish too much, but he did get a little bit of extra farm. It's good to cover lanes where somebody has died. Don't let that farm go to waste. A creep wave is always worth more than most of the jungle you can farm in that same time. So Annie is coming back to lane, and she's got a health crystal. It looks like she's working towards a haunting guise, and she needs a little bit of health herself to survive all of this burst that Ari has been throwing on her. However, Annie's Ignite and her Flash are back, so now she poses a fairly big threat to this Ari. And she's got her stun up, and Ari is moving in, trying to get some creeps. Annie's a little cautious, but she's smart. She's got she had a ward in both of these bushes. They're gone now, but she was cool and warded. Most mids are too lazy, too cheap and stingy to do that. This Annie is a real team player. Throws down the wards, goes to help the team. I like the cut of her jib. And there's the flash, there's the tibbers, there's the ignite, there's the combo. And Ari is out of here. And so now we've seen another thing that can happen. When lanes are not quite as one-sided as this top lane, where I've been utterly decimating Wukong, when both champions have a large amount of burst, things are actually back and forth. You can, Ari actually killed this Annie twice. But because Ari, messing up names, so professional, Ari was half health, didn't have a whole lot of mana, Annie took the opportunity, used her stun, used her flash, used her tibbers, and took out Ari. And that's what I really wanted to show you in this lane, is that not all lanes are quite as snowbally as top, although some mid lanes can be, and some top lanes aren't. But when both champions have burst, zones of control are still strong. Wukong got totally zoned out because his burst was weaker than mine. And he wasn't able to get me low enough because of my sustain to burst me down at any point. Whereas because Ari overstayed her welcome a little bit mid lane, and because Annie has a lot of burst, especially at level 6 with her tibbers, she was able to utterly destroy Ari, get a kill back, and get herself back in the game. But you saw the whole time that it was all these zones of control, back and forth positioning, very delicate little dance that everybody's doing all the time. It's difficult to really get a grasp of this sometimes, because people will always do things that are unexpected. You won't expect a person to do that right then, and that'll surprise you. But if you pay attention and you learn all the champions, and you are a little forgiving of yourself when you make a mistake, and you make your mistakes boldly, you can come to understand zones of control. Now we have another replay I'd like to look at, and we're looking at the third lane that we have not yet seen. We're going to be examining bottom lane. And bottom lane is special because you don't just have champions one-on-one squaring off mano-a-mano. You've got duos, 2 champions each side, and that makes for some very interesting and very difficult to read zoning. It's not easy to tell what 2 champions are capable of. I mean, there's a million combinations. I cannot do the permutations and combinations off the top of my head, but when you've got 109 champions, there are a lot of potential combinations, and things will be difficult. You can't possibly have innate experienced knowledge of every single possible champion combination, so to an extent, you have to just sort of extrapolate and guess based off of what each champion is capable of. So let's take a look at this bottom lane. So here we have another game, and in this game, Miscue, my buddy Pete, who is doing a great job moderating chat, he's playing Zilean, but he's not Zilean mid, and I'm not Jace top, no, because we have a jungle Twitch. This is a fairly interesting choice, because jungle Twitch, in my opinion, is a little bit bad in Season 3. He doesn't clear very well, so out of my generous concern for this jungle Twitch, I'm going to do as much as I can to help him pull this red. But you can see we actually have a fairly interesting bottom lane. It's Zilean Jace. This is fairly atypical. We're going up against a Leona Draven lane. That's actually a lot more typical. It's a very standard kill lane. Leona adds a crap ton of damage through her passive. Draven does a crap ton of damage because he's a crazy AD carry. And so if you were to have a much more passive lane, like, yes, this is actually a ranked match. This is not very high ELO, mind you, but this is a ranked match. This is in the 1200 range. I have this Monte is my Smurf that I play with Miscue, and so this game is very crazy. This is not your standard high professional tournament play. But if you pay attention to the champions, Jace and Zilean have some interesting synergy. For one, Jace has a really big zone of control because his Q can go a huge distance. It's a very long skill shot nuke. It does a lot of damage. On top of that, he can speed himself and his ally up. And then, on top of all of that, he can change forms to hammer form, which gives him a gap closer, which slows. It gives him a pushback, which does a ton of damage. It gives him all sorts of stuff. He does a lot. And he's very dangerous when he all-ins on a champion. Add to that Zilean's ranged harass with his bombs, his speed up, and his ultimate, which can revive somebody from the brink of death. you have a very interesting, very strong harass lane. On the other hand, Leona is a very tanky champion. She has a hook, she has a stun, and on top of all of that, she has her ultimate, which is a nice big ranged AoE attack. And Draven has a ton of damage, so you've got some pretty strong zones of control on both sides. And right away, we have a gank from Twitch. There's a little bit of split focus. Miscue and the Twitch are on Draven. I was fighting Leona, and as a result, Zilean, his time has come, and he has perished. We didn't kill either of them. If I had switched to Draven, or anybody had switched to Leona, we would have had a kill. Instead, we've given advantage Draven. Not really what we want to have happen, because if Draven and Leona get a big advantage, they can really run with it. If Leona jumps on top of you and hits you with a Q, things can really, really go poorly. So we can see that Draven, in his infinite wisdom, has picked up a second Doran's Blade. This is a very different decision from our Wukong earlier. He's going all in on the offense. Why? Well, he knows that Leona can lock somebody down, and as long as Draven just does a crap ton of damage, he can totally murder them, and they will keep snowballing their advantage. However, we do, maybe things will go bad. Maybe things will go well. We're still here, we're confident in our abilities, and I'm going to leave Miscue alone in the lane because I need to buy. I started with a longsword because I wanted to have some damage early as well. I'm going to buy boots, I'm going to buy a ward, and Miscue is left here with the ghosts of all the minions that have perished. And, boots are good for me because it synergizes with our speed boosts, and my biggest issue, for the most part, is actually once I want to kill this Draven, getting close to him. My goal is to poke him down with my Q, and then, when the time is right, jump on him with my hammer Q, and just do a ton of damage and murder him. Instead, we see that Miscue has gotten hooked. He was generally keeping a safe distance from Leona, but for just a moment, Leona got too close, hooked onto him, and got some damage down. But it's not too bad. He's got a little bit of damage. He's using some potions. Things are okay. We don't want to see that happen too much. And there's another one. He did not see Leona was in this bush. Some damage comes down, but because Leona left Draven to himself, I'm actually able to do a ton of damage to Draven. I took some in return, but even though Leona is at full health, Draven is so low that if Leona were to engage again, it would be very dangerous for Draven. And though she engages again, we saw I just didn't even care that she was in this bush. Because why? Well, Draven was all the way back here, and Leona was way over here. And so there just wasn't a threat to me. If Leona jumped on me, I'd survive. So Twitch has come in to try another gank, but he was seen by the minions down here before he stealthed, and so Leona and Draven are able to back off, no problem. I'm killing some more minions. There are a few down here that I'm going to miss because I tried to assist the gank, but hey, I used my Q. I pick up a couple. Not too much. I'm about even. Well, I'm actually a little bit ahead of this Draven on creep score. I'll move these down for convenient comparison. Just a little bit. There we go. Everybody's nice and lined up. And we can see Leona's in this bush again, but we're keeping a safe distance from the bush. She misses her hook. And if she'd even landed that hook, she would have been under the tower. That would have been dangerous. In any case, I throw a ward in the bush. Draven's not able to make anything happen. I'm queuing minions. I'm just trying to get some farm. Why? I don't have any mana or health. My threat level at this moment is very low. They know it. They're staying way close up. They're not afraid of me, and they're certainly not afraid of Twitch coming into gank because we could not really help him. Miscue is also recalling because he wants to buy as well. And we're going to note, I've bought a Fairy Charm and a Flask. Now this game happened back when Flask was still 225 gold rather than 345. So I'm able to buy it and a Fairy Charm, and I'm okay. And the reason why I'm buying Fairy Charm is twofold. One, I have a huge zone of control as long as I have mana. I can harass from all the way from behind this tower, and I could hit Draven right now if I was there. Why? Because his Q has ridiculous range when chained with his E. But that's mana limited. So getting additional mana allows me to harass from range. And because this is a cannon minion wave, he couldn't push the creeps fast enough to stop me from getting back to lane quickly, so I don't miss too many creeps, I miss a few. But really, whenever you go back, you really want to time it when there's a cannon minion wave, because it just takes so much longer for them to push it, and you miss fewer creeps. So I've come back, I've got mana. Draven is actually by himself. We realize this because this ward shows no Leona, and immediately once we've made the realization, we push him back. And look at this pressure. With 2 champions and only 1 in lane, he runs all the way back to his tower because he's that freaking scared of us. He knows I've got huge range on my Q. He knows that we can speed the heck up at any moment and just go for him. And so he is nowhere near these minions right now. It's not until Leona comes back to lane that he feels safe to come close to the creeps again. Now, I'm a dutiful AD carry. This is a little bit of a kill lane, so I've bought a ward, and I've come up here to place it. And Leona, being the smart player she is, has come to cut me off. Now, look at this position. Leona's zone of control is approximately, this big circle here because it's the range of her hook. By moving over this way, she's completely cut off my escape. If I go this way, she'll be able to hook me. I can't obviously run into her. And Talon's not mid. He's up here ganking this Olaf. So if I were to run this way, Malzahar could just completely disengage from these minions and come and murder me. He's about to hit level 6. That's dangerous. So my only option is to run this way through Leona's zone of control and take some damage. And sure enough, that's what happened. I kind of tried to juke around and be a little unpredictable, but she's just right on top of me. However, something strange has happened. I'm beating the ever-living snot out of her. Why? Well, first of all, when a support and a carry fight, usually the support loses. Why? Because the carry has all the damages and the support is mostly all creep, all CC, crowd control, that sort of thing. But if we'll just rewind a little bit, and let's look at this situation again. Leona has realized that I'm all the way up here warding, and so she's going to cut me off. In a sense, her zone of control isn't simply the area around her, but it's how far she can move and cut me off. So she moves over this way once the game is caught up, and Draven is trying to catch up, but he's actually way far behind because he retreated maybe a little too far. Just a little too far, and wasn't able, and didn't come up close enough with Leona to make anything happen. And so what happens? Well, the ever-dutiful Miscue has realized what's going on, and now look at him. His zone of control is cutting off Draven. When Draven tries to come to fight me, Miscue slows him. Draven tries to turn around and fight Miscue because why? Well, carries always beat supports, generally speaking, at this stage of the game. But because he spent so much time dealing with Miscue on Zilean, he was very late to arrive here, and as a result, Leona has died, and now it's 2v1. And the fight is going on. Maybe Miscue should have retreated, but he took a ton of damage. He got a final bomb off on him, and between Twitch and myself, Draven dies. Even without Twitch, I had flashed up. I could have caught up to that Draven. I could have slowed him and done a bunch of damage again. But that fight turned out poorly. Why? Well, zones of control. I was caught out by a zone of control. And if Draven had been closer to Leona, I probably would have had to run over to Dragon and flash over this wall to escape, but they would probably have flashed after me, and I might have died. I would have taken 2 flashes with me, but it was not going to be a good situation. However, because Draven was so far behind, and because Miscue's zone of control cut him off from getting to me, we essentially won that fight. And that's very good for me, because it means that when I go back to base after finishing off all of these creeps, I can get some good items and help put myself further ahead. Now, Draven has finished buying Berserker's Greaves. That will help him with some of his positioning issues because he'll be faster. He won't have to react quite so quickly in order to be where he needs to be. He will be able to run away faster from us, who are so fast. Meanwhile, I have built a Tear of the Goddess, and why am I building a Tear of the Goddess? Well, again, if I have mana, I can harass, and if I can harass, I can whittle him down, and if I can whittle this Draven down, who does not have any sort of sustain beyond his Doran's Blades, I can potentially get him to a point where I can just kill him. And the other advantage of building Tear of the Goddess is that if you look at my team's composition, outside of Miscue, we're all AD. And I want to keep the enemy team honest, so I want to build Manamune, upgrade it into Muramana, so that we have a little bit of extra magic damage. So again, I went back on a cannon minion wave, and because it's a cannon minion wave, even though this Draven is auto-attacking like crazy most of the time, he's not able to push the wave to the tower. He was not fast enough, and so I've come back and the wave is mostly intact. Miscue tried to pick up some creep score while I was gone. That's a very smart thing to do. He actually has twice the creep score of this Leona. Hats off to Miscue. I've landed a Q on Draven, and this is where the whittling down starts. Draven is way back from me. Even though Leona is so far forward, he has to hang far back. Why? Because I have ridiculous range on my Q. I can just nuke him from orbit. It's crazy. And Leona, even when she's really far up compared to Draven, she can't really make things happen because I can stay far back while still keeping this Draven in my zone of control. You can see I've actually already got him to half health. Even though we don't have a ward in this bush, we're not too afraid of this Leona. She's not terribly dangerous to us. Why? Well, because if we just go past her and go for this Draven, he probably will die. And you can see, once she used her abilities, I was free to move right up close to Draven, forcing both of them back. She turned around to try to make something happen, but she didn't have her hook, so instead she took half her health and damage, and now they're not in a very good position. You can see how far back Draven is standing again. He does not want to be anywhere near me without creeps, because this happens. And now that that's happened, we're like, you know what? Draven's way too far forward. Here comes the speed up. I did get hooked, but it doesn't matter. I'm just murdering this Leona. The moment she hooked me and stunned me, I'm like, whatever, she's the target. We kill her. Draven has a bomb on her head. Again, the speed up. We're moving fast. Another speed up from Zilean. Here comes the gap closer, and he is down. I actually flashed for that unnecessarily. But, you know what? That's the power of speed-ups, of people being out of position, of just willing people down. And this is the power of a Malphite with Flash and his ultimate against a Jace who totally forgot he had Flask and didn't use any of his charges. That's right. I forgot to use 3 full Flask charges, which would have been 300 health. With that 300 health, I probably would have survived. Pro Jace. Pro Jace. In any case, you can see how this lane dynamic is working. Our speed and our damage is giving us a ton of zone control. Even though Draven was all the way back here when we decided to engage, he would have just been, like, he would have been too close, even then. The charges on Flask are not instant, they're just like potions, but I could have used them from the very start of our combat with Draven and Leona, and I probably would have survived. I always forget potions. It's one of my many flaws as a League of Legends player, but it's something that I may eventually fix. In any case, Draven is back in lane. He has bought a Vampiric Scepter. He's bought potions. He's got 2 Doran's Blades. He is going crazy on the sustain. Why? He does not want me to whittle him down again. That's just really bad for him to take those Qs, to take that damage, and to be in all of that trouble. He's pushing the wave. I told Miss Q, you know, bomb that, get some extra damage. And all of a sudden, we're acting all coy. Why? Well, Twitch is going for them, but we didn't want to alert them to that. He attacks. He kind of should have backed off once he failed to accomplish anything there, but he gets some damage off. He blows his expunge early, but you know, the bomb's going to pick up that Draven. It does. Leona looks like she might get away. I don't have my Q at the moment, but I have a speed up. I'm going to go for it. She stuns me under the tower, but you know what? I do enough damage that I'm able to just get away. Thankfully, there's no Malzahar or Malphite or Olaf or somebody in this bush. I survive, and you can kind of see just how bad this lane has gotten for Leona and Draven. It's really, really hard for them to judge the zone of control because so much of it is unclear. It's the range of my Q, which changes based on where their minions are. If there are minions in the way, they can't be hit by it, but if there aren't, they can. It's the range of our speed-ups, giving us the ability to just zoom into lane. It's so many different things, and it's so hard for them to fight that. And of course, here's Malphite again with another ultimate combo, thinking he's going to pick up a Zilean, but you know what? It's Zilean. No dice. Zilean lives, and Malphite is unable to pick up the kill that time. Why? Because Zilean has used at least 1 charge on his Flask, unlike a certain nub. Unlike a certain newbie. So, because we knew Malphite was hanging around, we hang all the way back. I managed to do no damage to him with my Q because he's got his overpowered passive. And so Draven and Leona have a little bit of leeway. I don't know what causes this shadow bug either, but all I know is that I'm still hitting Draven with these mad, awesome Q attacks, and he's working very hard to sustain himself back. There's another one. It's not been powered, but it still does a lot of damage. He's still getting whittled down. It's still dangerous for him to be so far forward. Why? Because Talon's coming down. Again, he's having to back the hell away, but all of the speed-ups, even through his slow, I'm able to catch up, I'm able to get an assist, and we're able to fight this Leona. But Malphite has appeared. I don't care. I'm going to kill this Leona. All is well. I'm going to get away, except there's a Malzahar in the bush. And so we actually, 3 of us died for that. 3 for 2, not exactly the best situation. You kind of don't want to lose 3 people to kill 2. Although Draven died fast enough, he didn't get any assists or any of the benefit of that. So that puts him further behind, and it's a great idea to put Draven behind. Because, well, because, you know, he can carry really hard if you give him an edge. So, if we look at the lane situation right now, I'm a good 800 gold ahead of this Draven. Miscue is keeping par with this Leona. And so, we're doing very well. I've finally finished Manamune, which actually will give me some more attack damage in addition to all that mana. I'm a much bigger threat now, thanks to that. I've gotten Merc Treads, which makes me faster, which makes Leona's crowd control less effective. We're picking up all the advantages, and Miscue has actually got some cooldown reduction, lots of it. That'll make him more effective. We have a fairly good advantage. All that they have, well, they got a GP10, they've got some sustain. Emblem of Valor, not bad. Miscue with the mad creep score skills. He's got 4 times the creep score of this Leona, who I'm like, hey, look, it's a Leona trying to ward. Just do a whole ton of damage to her. There's half her health right there. Bam. Well, not quite half, but she's using a potion. And this is kind of the danger we pose. Even Leona right now, through her defensive steroid, can take a ton of damage in a hurry. It's not safe for her to initiate at half health, or even at 3/4 health. Why? Well, because we can just do a whole ton of damage like that. But she's still going for the hook. She gets on top of Miscue, but hey, we don't really care. I'm going to just jump on Draven, and I'm going to knock him back. That was the most overpowered knockback ever. Draven, unfortunately, is not going to live. Well, unfortunately for him, he dies. Leona is in no position to do anything at this point, even with her flask charges. She's not going to heal enough. She's just going to have to hang by this turret, and even hanging by this turret is dangerous. Why? Well, because Zilean ult is up. We could totally tower dive this if we so chose. It would be dangerous, but instead, we're going to go for a dragon. And this will actually be a fairly easy dragon. Why? Well, Draven's dead. We know that Malphite's mid. We see Olaf mid too, but you know what? They're not actually coming. If we look at our vision, we can see they're right here, and they're only now starting to move in our direction, but we saw that. And this is where my team ignores zones of control. Now, zones of control are not limited to just this immediate area around their champion where they can do things, but as we saw earlier, when Leona cut me off, they also extend based on how far your champion can travel. In a sense, there's a zone of control around this Malzahar and this Olaf that represents how far they can move to try to cut us off as we escape. So knowing that, me and Miscue are going to run back to the nearest tower where it's safe. We saw that they were all middle and that some of them were starting to head this way, so we want to go back. Talon and Pantheon, on the other hand, have other ideas. They run right into the bush with this Malphite, who chases Talon down. Pantheon realizes something is bad. All of a sudden, there's the Malphite ult. In comes the Malzahar, he ults Talon. I'm going to try to jump on the Malzahar, but my Q is blocked by this minion. OP Malzahar Voidlings. Miscue uses his ultimate, but he's not in a very good position because there's nobody around but them chickens. And he dies. Talon died over here to Leona, of all people. And things just went horrible for us. Why? Because we ignored zones of control. So those are zones of control. They can be as simple as just the area around a Blitzcrank where he can hook you. They can be as complicated as how far people in the middle lane can move to cut you off. They can be really weird dynamic mixes of 2 champions who've got speed boosts or other abilities. You would imagine that an Ashe lane would have some pretty nasty zones of control with her ultimate if you're not careful and able to dodge. And this is a topic that's very important to learn because it has so much to do not only with positioning in the lane, where it's very obvious what zones of control do, but also when you're prepping for team fights, when you're sieging outside of turrets and objectives, zones of control play a big part. If you want to be a good AD carry, or any carry in fact, you need to understand where it's safe to stand, where it's not safe to stand, and why, and that has a lot to do with zones of control. So that's the show for today. good time to wrap it up is right before 9 o'clock. It is 9 o'clock right now, but if you want, I will answer any questions you have. I don't see any right now. In the meantime, I will shill for my channel. This is Montgomery Law on Twitch TV, Mondays with Monte. Please follow me on Twitch. If you have any questions, you can send them to montgomerylaw@gmail.com. I have also a Twitter account. It's Montgomery Law. I am Montgomery Law all over the place. I archive all of these shows on YouTube. And so you can find any past shows there. So please, 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 I am shilling for all of them social medias. I am all over the place. Thank you very much for following and for watching. I love you all. I do have a question from the ever-narcissistic Miscue. He wants to know how this Zilean and Jace game ended up for you. And let me just see if I can find the pivotal ending fight here in this replay. Let me see. No, that's not quite it yet. That's not quite it, not quite it, not quite it. Speeding on along. Is this it? No, that's after the fight. I need to back up. Slow down, slow down, slow down. Alrighty, since somebody wanted to see this, somebody very narcissistic, here is this pivotal end fight. As you can see, we have a very, very slight gold advantage, but they have been pushing all the towers. They've taken an inhibitor. Things are not good for us. I'm going to speed it up just a little bit, trying to poke a little bit with my awesome Jace build, which is all about the manas. We can see that they're pushing towards us. We're a little bit afraid. They tried to catch that Twitch out of position. Talon's off to the side. Here's the flash from Malphite. He's going on top of the Twitch. Twitch has been caught out of position. Surely Leona and Olaf will follow this up, but things are not exactly as they seem. Why? We have Zilean. Right at this last second, there's the Olaf axe, there's the burst damage, and there's the Zilean ult. And what's happening over here? There's a freaking Talon in the middle of their carries. There's a Pantheon on top of their Draven, and here's Jace getting the speed boost, getting the gap closer on Draven, getting the kill. Total #1 kill stealer, this Jace. There goes Malzahar, and if we look at the situation right now, Purple team no longer has their damage champions. I guess Olaf is still here, so what does blue team do? Well, Twitch is about to revive, and everybody just... let's smack Olaf around. Smack Olaf towards the Twitch. Twitch happily obliges by attacking him. Bombs go down on Leona. Pantheon is totally wussing out. You've got Guardian Angel, man. Don't run away. Talon's like, hey, look, Olaf's low. Jump on him. Let's murder Olaf. And all of a sudden, all of their damage champions are gone. There's only Malphite and Leona left. Why? Because they completely abandoned their poor carries. We have a freaking crazy dive composition, so what do? Well, we dove their carries, and ours survived because we have a Zilean, and he used his ultimate at just the right time. They actually have Baron buff right now, by the way. This purple team had Baron. They had murdered Baron. It appears on the minimap because I have no idea why, but it's not there because they've got the buff. And Malphite is all by himself. I do the mad magic damage with my Muramana. And this poor Malphite, who's been building almost all armor, dies. And for no apparent reason, Pantheon has decided to recall and not push with us. But if we just speed things up crazily, you can see we push a turret, we push an inhibitor, and this is actually going to be game. This is Miscue's narcissism on the record here. Everybody just pay attention to Miscue and his amazing Zilean ult, saving the Twitch, winning the game, and that is how it's done. We did manage to win. Draven actually managed to catch up in kills, although not in assists, because I'm always the assist master. But there we go. There's the Nexus. Victory for us. I hope that you were happy, Pete. I hope you're happy that we did that for you. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you all for watching. I really need to get a graphic so I can show all them social medias without having to just ramble at you, and hope that you can remember to spell my weird name. How strong do I think a Bruiser's build on Draven would be? Well, I've been a firm proponent of, I think that there's potential to Bruiser builds, especially on champions with very good AD scaling. And Draven is a champion with very good AD scaling. So if you've got a lot of innate damage, like Draven does, building a more Bruiserous build, something like Brutalizer into Phage and Frozen Mallet or Warmogs or something, could potentially work, and even would be ideal, because when you're a champion who likes to be close in, like Graves or Draven, and you no longer have to worry about, well, that Olaf's in my face, and I'm just going to die instantly, things actually work out a lot better for you. I mean, I've done it in ARAMs at least. It can be very good. but I haven't actually tested it. But there's some potential there behind the idea. There's a guy on the Team Liquid forums, the Yanko, who is really pushing the idea that AD carries shouldn't just rely on one defense item, such as Guardian Angel, in order to survive. They should really be looking to get something like a Warmogs, and then one other defensive item, a Locket, or a Thornmail, or even an Aegis, or something like that. Something to give them a rounded out defense, because as long as you have all of that, and then on top of that, you've got your standard AD items, you can still do a lot of damage, and simply by surviving a long time, things can work out pretty well for you. It's a cool idea. I haven't tested it yet. I do have a testing initiative. Some friends of mine from the Team Liquid forums, all of us get together on Fridays and try out crazy ideas. We are very bad at trying out crazy ideas, however. Last week was something of a disaster. But, there's always next week. Does anybody have any further questions? And if not, I will finally close out the show. I don't want to keep you all any longer from solo queue or whatever else. And I totally need to chill on some lemonade. Well, thank you all very much for watching again. Mondays with Monte every week, 8 p.m. Central. That's 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. West Coast, Best Coast. Thank you all for watching, and good night.